My husband Darius was preparing dinner when he received a message from a coworker. "Boss, I miss you." After a moment of hesitation, I replied for him, "Come over. My wife isn't home today." A short while later, the doorbell rang. My husband's face went pale as a ghost, drained of every drop of blood. In the spacious kitchen of our luxury condo in Buckhead, the sweet and savory aroma of slow-cooked oxtails permeated everything. It was the scent of home warmth, of that happy family life everyone dreams of. Or at least that was what I had firmly believed until that very instant. Darius was standing in front of the stove, wearing the navy blue apron I'd given him for our anniversary, humming an old R&B love song while stirring the pot with quiet confidence. From behind, he looked like everything a woman could ever ask for successful, grounded loving. A man who always told me that earning money outside was a duty, but cooking for his wife at home was a privilege. I sat at the kitchen island flipping through an architectural digest, or at least pretending to. My eyes drifted to his brand new iPhone lying face up on the marble countertop, black as a still pond and just as deceptive. For a moment, the apartment felt suspended in a soft golden glow, the illusion of a happy life floating in the warm light of early evening. Then the phone lit up. No sound, just a cold, sharp flash of blue cutting through the room. My eyes moved before I could stop them. A WhatsApp notification swept across the screen. 4 small words. 4 words that broke the world I thought I had built. "Boss, I miss you." From Kaylani, the intern. My heart didn't drop. It didn't explode. It simply went still, as if it had already died days earlier, when I held our bank statements and felt for the first time that something was deeply wrong. What surfaced now wasn't pain. It was a hard, lucid contempt, a cold clarity. Darius kept chopping vegetables behind me, blissfully unaware the steady rhythm of the knife, masking the storm rising in my chest. I reached for the phone quietly. The passcode was our wedding anniversary. The irony stabbed deeper than the message itself. He had used the best day of our lives as the lock protecting his secrets. I typed in the 6 digits. The screen unlocked. The conversation was right there at the top, her unread message glaring like a wound. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Instead, with a calm so unnatural it almost frightened me, my fingers moved across the keyboard. "Come over. My wife isn't home today." I hit send. The blue double check marks appeared almost instantly. A faint smile tugged at my lips. Not joy, but precision, method, purpose. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to my own phone, deleted all traces from his, and placed the device back on the counter at the exact angle it had been before. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the explosion of restrained rage pulsing beneath my skin. I looked at Darius's back as he worked, relaxed and humming the picture of a perfect man. But in my eyes, the veneer had cracked. He wasn't a devoted husband. He was a liar in an apron seasoning a stew while planning a life in the shadows. I fixed my hair, straightened my posture, locked every emotion behind a serene gaze. A storm was coming, and I intended to be its creator. I tried to slip back into the role of a calm wife, the one Darius believed he still lived with. I ran my fingers along the edge of the magazine, pretending to read, pretending nothing inside me had shifted. But the truth was, sitting heavily in my lungs, pressing upward as if every breath were now borrowed. Darius carried the pot of oxtails to the dining table with meticulous care, the aroma rich with allspice thyme and slow-rendered beef, used to warm me down to the bone. Tonight it felt like a sweet-coated poison, a reminder of a life that was already rotting from the inside out. He wiped the rim of the serving dish as if perfection in presentation could cover the imperfections in his loyalty. He served me first, placing a generous scoop of white rice on my plate, then choosing the most tender-looking piece of meat for me as if he were offering love on a fork. "Eat while it's hot, baby," he said with that deep, warm voice people always praised him for. I cooked it until it falls right off the bone. Went to 3 different markets just to get the right cuts. Once upon a time, that would have made my heart swell. Today I had to steady my hands to keep them from shaking with disgust. I took a bite. It was delicious. Darius was always a gifted cook, but the moment it touched my tongue, it turned bitter. Acidic. Wrong. I swallowed with effort and reached for my water before the nausea rose too high. Across the table, he ate with an eager appetite, occasionally offering me sides and sharing light stories from work, laughing a little too loudly at his own jokes. He talked about a new project. He talked about praise from the CEO. He talked about his upcoming promotion. He talked about everything except Kaylani. Not one slip of her name. Not even a hint of guilt. A man could receive "I miss you" from another woman and moments later eat dinner with his wife like nothing had happened. Maybe he had been practicing this dual life for so long that even I could no longer tell which version of him was real. I stared at him across the polished table, watching a man I'd once trusted completely reveal himself in the smallest gestures, the way he avoided eye contact, the way his smile lingered too long, the way he filled silence with meaningless details to keep me from noticing the truth lurking underneath. My mind drifted back to our beginnings. The tiny studio apartment, the hand-me-down furniture, the shared dreams whispered over cheap takeout. He had sworn he would build a life for us, a real home. And he did. This luxury condo, these comforts, we built them together. But somewhere along the climb, abundance had turned his head. Somewhere in the glow of success, the woman who once shared a single sandwich with him had stopped being enough. I set down my silverware and sighed softly. "I'm not very hungry tonight," I murmured. Concern flashed across his face instantly. He stood, walked around the table, and pressed the back of his hand to my forehead. His touch was warm, familiar, the kind of touch that used to make me lean in. Tonight it felt like ice soaking straight into my bones. I moved slightly away, pretending to reach for my water. My eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. Nearly 7 p.m. If Kaylani left immediately after reading that message, she'd be here within the hour. I could feel the seconds dragging each one, sharpening the anticipation coiled inside me. When I returned to the table, Darius was already clearing the plates. "Go rest in the living room," he said. "I'll take care of the dishes." Once that gentleness would have made me proud to call him mine. Now it felt like part of his performance, the perfect husband persona he wore so convincingly it almost fooled me again. I walked to the sofa, sat down, and held the remote without turning the TV on. My entire focus shifted to the front door. Every sound in the hallway made my pulse spike. A civil war raged inside me. Half of me wanted her not to come. Half of me wanted that doorbell to ring right now so the infection could finally be cut open. The water in the sink stopped running. Darius dried his hands and glanced at me with soft eyes. He didn't notice the storm gathering in mine. Back on the wall, the clock ticked toward 8 p.m., steady and merciless. Any moment now. I settled onto the sofa, but I didn't turn on the TV. The remote sat cold in my hand, untouched, because every part of me was tuned to the front door. My ears sharpened to the faintest sound coming from the hallway outside our condo, every passing footstep, every distant elevator chime. It was like waiting for a bomb I had built myself, knowing it would explode, knowing exactly who it was meant for. Part of me wished she wouldn't show up, that maybe she'd hesitate or get stuck in traffic or decide it was inappropriate to visit her boss at night, that maybe this was all a misunderstanding and I could climb back into the illusion I'd lived in for 6 years. But the colder, clearer part of me, the woman who had read that message, gathered the proof, typed "come over" with surgical precision, needed the truth to walk straight into my home, needed the abscess to burst so the infection could finally drain. Behind me, the steady sounds of Darius cleaning up faded. The running water stopped. Drawers closed softly. The kitchen lights dimmed as he shut them off one by one. Soon he appeared at the edge of the living room, drying his hands with a towel. His expression relaxed, almost tender. He had no idea he was standing at the edge of his own downfall. "You want some fruit for dessert?" he asked. I shook my head, giving him a small smile. The smile felt crooked, unfamiliar, stretched across skin that no longer belonged to the same woman he woke up next to this morning. He didn't notice. He never really noticed much at all. The clock on the wall clicked toward 8 p.m., loud in the silence. Our entire condo felt suspended, too quiet, too still, like the air itself was holding its breath for what was coming. Darius sat across from me on the opposite sofa, scrolling through the news on his phone, completely at ease. He probably thought tonight would end like any other ordinary evening dinner, a little TV small talk before bed. Or worse, maybe he was already thinking about what to text Kaylani after I fell asleep. He had no idea that the storm was already inside the house with him. Time dragged every minute, stretching thin as wire. I kept my gaze fixed forward, my pulse syncing with the ticking clock, waiting for the moment when all pretense would shatter. Inside my chest, my heartbeat drummed between anger and cold composure, a rhythm only I could hear. 8 p.m. Silence thickened. Darius didn't even look up from his screen, and then the doorbell rang. Not loud, just a soft ding-dong, but in that quiet apartment it echoed like the opening shot of a war. Darius's head snapped up. Confusion flashed across his face, followed by something else. Fear, faint but unmistakable. He looked at the clock, then at the door, then at me, as if hoping I held the explanation. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply said in a calm voice edged with steel, "Stay seated. I'll get it." And I stood smoothing my clothes, steadying my breath as I walked toward the final confirmation of everything I already knew. The storm had arrived right on time. I walked toward the door with slow, steady steps, each one sinking into the hardwood floor like a nail sealing the fate of the two people about to face judgment. My hand closed around the cold metal knob. I inhaled once deeply, then turned it. The door swung open. There she was, Kaylani, petite, pretty, carefully made up, wearing a tight dress that clung to her youth and inexperience. In her hands, she carried a small box, an individually packaged cupcake, tied with a ribbon, like some pathetic peace offering. I watched the expression on her face shift in real time. The flirtatious smile she had clearly prepared froze the instant she saw me. Her eyes widened to the size of saucers, her skin draining of color until she looked almost gray. Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the box. She wasn't expecting Imani, the wife. She was expecting Darius. She had imagined him opening the door, maybe smiling softly, maybe pulling her inside while whispering how much he'd missed her too. She had imagined herself stepping into my home as if she had some right to it. But instead, she was met with my calm, unblinking stare, a stare sharpened into a blade. I didn't say anything at first. Silence is sometimes the deadliest weapon, and I let it stretch, let it swallow her. The hallway light behind her made her look even smaller, like a child who'd wandered somewhere she wasn't meant to be. She stuttered something under her breath, but no words formed. Her lips simply opened and closed, desperate to find an escape, but there was none. Footsteps sounded behind me. Darius's voice floated from the living room. "Who is it, babe? Why are you taking so long?" The moment he appeared behind me, I felt more than saw his body jolt. I didn't need to look at him to know his face had collapsed into panic. He had never imagined Kaylani would actually show up. He had never imagined I would be the one opening that door. Kaylani's eyes darted past me toward him, filled with confusion, terror, and a flicker of hope that he might rescue her from this moment. He didn't move. I finally smiled. It was a small smile, but sharp enough to draw blood. "Hello, Kaylani," I said, my voice low, but clear enough for both of them to hear. "Are you here to see my husband?" The words hit her like ice water thrown straight into the chest. She flinched, hard. Darius stood silently behind me, frozen mouth slightly open, incapable of forming even one coherent sentence. His eyes jumped between the two of us, pleading for an exit that didn't exist. Kaylani swallowed, trying to pull herself together. After several failed attempts, she finally managed to whisper a flimsy excuse. She said she'd heard Darius wasn't feeling well. She said she happened to be in the neighborhood. She said she brought him a cupcake to cheer him up. A cupcake? At 8 o'clock at night, in a gated community you can't happen to pass by. I didn't correct her. This was a cat and mouse game, and the fun comes from letting the mouse think it might live a little longer. I stepped aside. "Well," I said gently, "since you've come all this way, why don't you come in?" Kaylani froze again. But fear makes people obedient. She stepped inside my home, each footstep small and unsure. I watched her carefully as if watching a thief caught under a spotlight. Behind me, I sensed Darius's world cracking. The performance had begun, and none of them were going to leave this stage the same. I led Kaylani into the living room with a warm, polite smile, the kind reserved for guests you intend to destroy slowly. I gestured toward the armchair across from the large sofa where Darius usually sat. She perched on the edge of it, knees pressed together, hands trembling around the tiny cupcake box like a child awaiting punishment. Darius followed behind me like a ghost. His face drained, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. He sat on the sofa only because I motioned for him to. Even then, he chose the farthest corner, as if the cushions might swallow him whole. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked, my tone soaked in honey. "What, water is fine," she whispered. "Of course." I walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and let my hand glide past our expensive Waterford crystal, the gold-rimmed glasses we saved for important guests. Instead, I reached for a thin, disposable plastic cup, the kind you'd use at a cookout or at the office water cooler. I filled it straight from the tap. It wasn't the drink that mattered. It was the message. When I returned, I set the plastic cup in front of Kaylani, the cheap transparency clashing harshly with the luxury of my glass coffee table. She stared at it, cheeks flushing with humiliation. Then I placed 2 fine china teacups with delicate gold rims in front of Darius and myself. Her eyes flicked between the cups. She understood. Good. I settled beside Darius deliberately, close enough that our arms brushed. His body went rigid, his shoulders tensed. Through the fabric of his shirt, I could feel the nervous thrum of his heartbeat. I rested my head softly on his shoulder, an intimate gesture I hadn't made in months, not out of love, but out of weaponry. "So, Kaylani," I began, voice warm and conversational. "How's the internship going? Is Darius a good supervisor, not too demanding?" I hope she swallowed hard. "He's very professional." Professional. The irony nearly made me laugh. I stroked Darius's arm gently, as if proud of my professional husband. He flinched almost imperceptibly. Sweat was beginning to bead along his hairline. And I hope I continued sweetly, he doesn't harass or pressure the interns. We wouldn't want that, would we? Her eyes darted up, then back to the cup in her hands. Darius said nothing. His silence screamed. The air grew thick, so thick even the soft hum of the air conditioner couldn't cut through it. I kept talking, layering the trap carefully. "You know I said my voice a little brighter, Darius, and I have been planning our trip to St. Lucia next month. Candlelight dinners on the beach, blue water, the whole thing." I smiled tenderly at my husband, whose jaw tightened. We also just visited a lake house in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Perfect spot for weekends. And of course, my eyes slid toward her. "We're finally planning to start trying for a baby next year." That last part hit her like a punch to the stomach. Her face fell. Her fingers tightened around the plastic cup. A tremor rippled through her shoulders. I watched her break in, real time, the realization that she was not part of his future, nor his present, nor anything that mattered beyond whatever stolen moments they had shared. Everything, vacations, homes, family, stability, belonged to me. Next to me, Darius sat rigid and silent, barely breathing. The perfect husband mask he wore so often had shattered completely, leaving only a pale, sweating man who wanted desperately to escape his own living room. I wasn't done. "You're so young and pretty. "Kaylani," I said, pretending to admire her. "I'm sure you have plenty of men chasing after you. Meanwhile, I'm getting older. I have to hold on to this man before someone tries to steal him in a careless moment." I tilted my head, feigning innocent humor. There are so many thirsty side chicks popping up these days. Don't you think her breath caught? The plastic cup trembled violently in her hands. Color drained from her face until she was nearly translucent. She knew exactly what I was saying, exactly who I was talking about. The words lingered between us, settling like dust on a battlefield. She looked down at her lap shoulders, trembling, unable to meet my eyes. Darius stared at the floor, and I sat there, poised and calm, knowing the psychological noose was tightening one polite sentence at a time. Silence settled over the room, thick and suffocating, as if even the air didn't dare to move. The only sound was the faint tapping of the second hand on the wall clock, slicing through the tension like a metronome, marking the countdown to their collapse. Kaylani's knuckles had turned white around the plastic cup. She tried to take a sip, but her hand shook too violently, the water rippling dangerously close to the edge. She set it back down with a soft, nervous clatter. I watched her with a serene expression that masked the cold calculation beneath. She still held on to a thread of hope. Hope that maybe this was just an awkward misunderstanding, that maybe she could survive this night with some dignity intact. So I cut the thread. "So Kaylani," I said softly, as if we were just chatting between girlfriends, "you seem very attentive. You even know about Darius's stomach issues." Her entire body jerked. Color drained from Darius's face. It was the tiniest reaction, but enough to confirm everything I already knew. Kaylani blinked rapidly. I just noticed he looked uncomfortable at the office one day," she stammered. "He was holding his stomach and I asked if he was okay. That's all." I let out a light laugh, a laugh without warmth. "That's interesting," I said, "because Darius rarely shows pain in public. He has this pride about appearing strong, you know. He'll walk around with a migraine and still pretend everything's fine. Isn't that right, baby?" Darius swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. He couldn't finish the sentence. He couldn't even lie properly. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice gentle, almost sympathetic. "So if he lets you see that, he must feel very close to you. Closer than a supervisor should feel to an intern." Kaylani's breath hitched. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for an exit. I wasn't done. I turned to Darius, my tone shifting into something sharper, even though my voice never rose above a murmur. "And you? Why are you going around worrying the interns about your personal health? If you're not feeling well, you tell me. Your wife." I let the word linger, heavy with meaning. "Don't make other people think I'm not taking care of you." He stared at his shoes. He had no defense left. I continued, slowly tightening the psychological vice. "You told me the other night you were running late because of a client dinner," I said, "and that your stomach hurt afterward. Funny. I don't remember you mentioning an intern checking in on you or bringing you remedies." Kaylani inhaled sharply, realizing her careless comment had exposed far more than she intended. Her voice trembled as she tried to recover. "No, I didn't mean I only asked because he looked." Her words tangled and collapsed in her throat. I let her flounder for a moment before delivering the next blow, my tone deceptively kind. "Kaylani, sweetie, people usually only notice those kinds of pains when they spend a lot of time alone with someone." I tilted my head slightly. "Were you two alone often enough for you to notice?" Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Her shoulders trembled, small, involuntary shakes. She couldn't hide anymore. I could practically feel the walls closing in around her, squeezing the truth out like air from a vacuum. And beside me, Darius sat frozen each second, carving deeper shame into his features. The perfect image of a leader and role model was cracking right before her eyes. The perfect image of a devoted husband was cracking right before mine. The air grew colder, sharper, filled with the weight of everything left unspoken. And I knew then that the unveiling had only just begun. The living room had become a tomb. Even the soft hum of the AC seemed muted, swallowed by the tension pressing against the walls. Kaylani sat rigid in the armchair, her spine impossibly straight, her eyes watery and unfocused, as if she were bracing for an invisible blow. Darius looked equally ruined sweat, gathering at his temples, despite the cool air drifting through the condo. I decided the moment had arrived. I reached for my phone on the table, sliding my finger casually across the screen as if checking a message. I sighed loud enough for both of them to hear and spoke with the weary tone of a woman lamenting the state of the world. You know, I said everywhere you look these days, it's nothing but infidelity scandals. People sending messages to other women's husbands as if they were girlfriends. No shame at all. Silence. A silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. I watched Kaylani from the corner of my eye. She didn't move, but the rhythm of her breathing changed, quick, shallow, panicked. I went on, letting my words pierce gently like thin needles sinking into skin. I often check Darius's phone to help him with work, and lately, I paused just long enough to feel their dread swell. I've seen a lot of messages from unknown numbers, a young girl by the looks of it. Her name sounds very innocent. A tremor traveled visibly through Kaylani's body. She sends him very affectionate messages, I added softly. Darius wiped sweat from his forehead with a shaky hand. Kaylani stared straight ahead, frozen. I let a slow smile bloom on my lips, not kind, not warm, but sharp with purpose. You know what's wild, Kaylani? I said. Just the other day I was home while Darius was making dinner, and a girl texted him. I paused, savoring the tension, saying, I miss you. Everything inside Kaylani broke at once. Her eyes snapped to mine, wide, horrified pupils shrinking like she'd just been dragged underwater. The blood drained from her face until she looked almost translucent. She understood instantly. She saw the truth unfolding with devastating clarity. I had seen the message. I had replied to it. I had been the one to lure her here, and she had walked straight into the trap. Her hand shot to her chest as if she'd been stabbed. Her breathing turned ragged, tiny gasps escaping her lips. The cupcake box in her lap wobbled dangerously. Beside me, Darius stared at me in disbelief as if he were seeing me for the first time, as if he suddenly realized he had never known the woman he married. A chill ran through him so visibly I could almost hear it. Kaylani's voice finally cracked loose in a whisper. You knew I didn't answer. The silence alone carved the truth deeper into her. This was the final revelation. The moment she understood, she wasn't just caught, she was hunted. Her eyes filled her lips, trembled uncontrollably. She tried to stand, but her legs betrayed her, wobbling beneath her like she was learning to walk for the first time. The room felt too small for her shame, too bright, too revealing. She shot a desperate glance toward Darius, begging him to save her from this unbearable exposure. But he sat there, slumped, defeated, unable to even look at her. The man who had whispered sweet nothings in private couldn't spare her a single word now. She fumbled for her purse, knocking it against the armchair. She muttered that she had to leave, that something urgent had come up. Her excuses tangled together, flimsy and cracking apart like thin ice. I didn't rise immediately. I let her scramble, let her feel every ounce of humiliation. At last she stumbled toward the doorway, nearly tripping over her own feet. The hallway light poured over her like a spotlight on a collapsing performer. I followed her slowly with all the calm she lacked, and when she reached for the elevator button with shaking hands, I said her name, Kaylani. She froze, turned her head slowly. Her eyes were pleading, terrified, already defeated. I leaned in just a little, my voice soft as velvet and cold as winter. Next time you come to see my husband, I whispered, call first. Walking around a respectable place at this hour might make the neighbors misunderstand. The last sliver of color left her face. She nodded rapidly, small jerks of the head like a frightened animal, then rushed into the elevator the moment the doors opened. I watched as the doors closed on her trembling figure. One down. But the real confrontation was still waiting inside the living room. The elevator doors sealed shut around Kailani's trembling silhouette. Her exit left behind a silence so heavy it felt physical, pressing into my skin like cold metal. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my hand still resting on the doorframe, steadying myself. The calm performance I'd maintained all evening had come at a price. Now that she was gone, the nausea I had suppressed surged up from the pit of my stomach. The betrayal I had danced around with such control finally twisted inside me like a knife. I closed the condo door slowly but firmly. The echo of the lock sliding into place rang through the apartment like the starting bell of a second battle. I didn't rush back inside. I stayed where I was, eyes closed, fingers gripping the doorknob as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. My heart hurt. Not from love had died long before tonight, but from the sheer emotional violence of pulling off the performance, the psychological warfare, the humiliation, the trap, the exposure, the truth. I took one deep breath, then another, and finally walked toward the living room. Darius was still sitting on the cream-colored sofa, head-lowered shoulders, slumped hands clasped together, as if in prayer or surrender. His once confident posture gone, his polished charisma gone, his entire aura of control and authority obliterated. He looked small, pathetic, a man stripped of all the illusions he had built around himself. I approached the coffee table without a word. His smartphone still lay there abandoned in his panic when Kailani first appeared. I looked at it for a long moment, then picked it up. I held it in my hand. Then with one decisive movement, crack, I slammed it down on the glass tabletop. The sound shattered the room. The screen blew apart in a spiderweb of fractures, shards glittering like broken promises. Darius jolted upright eyes wide with terror. I crossed my arms and looked down at him. My expression held no anger, no tears, no trembling emotion, just cold certainty. "Explain yourself," I said. My voice was sharp and precise, cutting through the air like a blade. The message saying, "Come over. My wife isn't home today." I leaned in slightly. "I sent that." "Did you really think I was an idiot who didn't know anything?" Darius's face twisted in shock. His mouth fell open, but no words came out at first. When he finally managed to speak, his voice cracked. "Baby. It's not what you think. She and I were just coworkers. I swear to you, her coming here tonight, I didn't know she would." I laughed. Not kindly, not loudly. Just a low, bitter sound that sliced through his lie like a scalpel. Coworkers. A coworker texts you, "I miss you," at 8 at night. A coworker knows your eating habits and your health problems better than your wife. A coworker shows up at our home thinking I'm not here. I stepped closer, staring straight into his eyes. "Stop insulting my intelligence." He tried again, voice shaking. Mani, just listen, no." My voice was steel. "We've lived together for 6 years. I know your tells better than you do." That look you gave the door when the bell rang, that jump, that panic. "You exposed yourself before she even opened her mouth." He lowered his head again, defeated. His silence was the loudest confession he had ever made. I felt nothing but disgust. Not heartbreak, not sorrow, just the cold clarity of finally seeing the truth, without illusions. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a coward. But he had no idea that what was coming next would break him far more deeply than anything tonight. Darius sat frozen on the sofa, his hands clasped so tightly, his knuckles had turned bone white. Sweat rolled down his temples, even though the condo was cool. He looked like a man waiting for a sentence he knew he deserved. I didn't give him time to speak. Without breaking eye contact, I walked to the small console table by the wall and picked up the stack of documents I had prepared earlier that afternoon. The papers felt heavy in my hands, not because of their weight, but because of what they represented. I returned to him, then threw the entire stack onto his lap, the sheets scattered, sliding across the sofa and onto the floor. Darius frowned in confusion, but when he picked up the first page, his bank statement, his face drained of all color. I had circled every suspicious transaction with neat red ink transfers to Kaylani Jenkins. $80, $250, $300, and then $1,500 accompanied by the memo, "Happy Birthday." I crossed my arms, so I said calmly, "How do you explain that a $1,500 birthday gift for an intern? Interesting. For my birthday, a bouquet of supermarket flowers and a simple dinner was enough for you." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His lips trembled. His eyes, usually so steady and confident, flickered with panic. I didn't pause. I picked up another paper from the floor and flung it onto his lap. A screenshot, one of many. It was from his WhatsApp account on his iPad, the one he always forgot to log out of. The message preview was unmistakable. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. Miss you already." His face contorted with shame. I dropped another piece of evidence, a late-night movie ticket from 2 weeks ago. That night, I said evenly you told me you had a client dinner, but you were at an 11 p.m. movie with her. He swallowed hard, throat constricting. His hands shook so violently the ticket stub fluttered to the floor. I leaned down, retrieving one last item, the cherry on top, a long brown hair taped neatly onto a sheet of white paper. "My hair," I said, "is black and short, and this was on the passenger seat of your car. I wonder how it got there." He looked at it as though it were radioactive, every piece of evidence pressed into him like stones piling on a drowning man. And finally, Darius broke. He collapsed forward, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. His entire body shook. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Imani, please. I made a mistake. I was stupid. I don't know what happened. She came on to me. I wasn't myself. Please, baby, forgive me." Typical. Predictable. Cheaters always sang from the same miserable script. I watched him cry, a grown man, shoulders heaving. The sight didn't stir pity, not even a flicker, only a colder, deeper disappointment. I turned away from him and walked toward the kitchen. The pot of slow-cooked oxtails, his proud, carefully prepared dish, still sat on the stove. Hours of work. His attempt at playing the doting husband. I grabbed the pot with both hands and carried it to the trash bin. Darius's head snapped up, eyes widening. "Imani, wait." But it was too late. I tilted the pot and dumped the entire meal into the garbage. The stew hit the bottom of the trash can with a sickening splatter, its rich aroma instantly tainted by the sour smell of leftover scraps. I turned back to him. "My love for you was like this stew," I said quietly. "Once delicious, once precious." Then I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a cold whisper. "But once it's contaminated, it's nothing but trash. And I don't eat trash." Something in him shattered. He slid off the sofa and fell to his knees in front of me, clutching desperately at my legs. "I'll end it with her," he sobbed. "I'll quit my job. I'll do anything. Please, please don't leave me. Don't divorce me. I can fix this. I swear I can fix this." His tears soaked into the fabric of my pants. His hands clung to me like a drowning man to driftwood, but my heart was gone. Dead. Buried. I looked down at him, this man I once trusted, once admired, now reduced to a pitiful shell. "Stand up," I said coldly. "Have some dignity." He didn't. So I stepped back, shaking his hands off me, and walked toward the bedroom. The suitcase I had packed earlier was waiting. The decision had already been made. I rolled my suitcase out of the bedroom, its wheels thudding softly against the hardwood floor. I had packed it that afternoon before the trap, before the humiliation, before the confrontation. Somewhere deep down, I must have known this night would end exactly like this. Darius was still on the floor, crumpled in front of the couch, his face buried in his hands. The sound of his sobs echoed through the apartment that once felt warm and full of promise, now nothing more than a crime scene of broken trust. He looked up when he heard the suitcase. His eyes were red, swollen, pleading. "Imani, please, don't do this," he begged, voice hoarse. We can go to therapy. We can fix this. I'll change. I'll be better. Please don't leave me." I didn't even slow down. On the coffee table sat the stack of evidence, the shattered phone, and now one more document I had placed earlier, a promissory note, proof of the $40,000 my parents had lent us at the start of our marriage for the condo renovation. I pointed to it. That, I said coldly, is a real debt. When the house sells, the first thing you will do is repay every single cent to my parents. Darius blinked, rapidly, stunned. I don't have that kind of money." "That's not my problem," I replied. "You created this mess. You get to pay for it." I reached for the doorknob. He scrambled across the floor toward me, grabbing at my ankle, crying so hard he could barely breathe. "Imani, please don't leave. Don't divorce me. Don't take everything away. Please, please." I froze. Not because of his words, because of the pathetic realization that this man wasn't begging for my love. He was begging for his comfort, his stability, his lifestyle. "Get up," I said sharply. "You're embarrassing yourself." He didn't move, so I stepped out of his grip and opened the door. The hallway air was cool, still, free. I didn't look back, not even once. The door closed behind me with a firm, echoing click. Just like that, 6 years of marriage came to an end. I dragged the suitcase behind me toward the elevator. My footsteps sounded steady, even though my body trembled with adrenaline exhaustion and the faint aftershock of emotional devastation. When I reached the street, an Uber I had ordered earlier was already waiting. I slid into the back seat, sinking into the worn leather. The city lights flickered past the windows as the car moved. Skyscrapers, intersections, neon signs, all the things that once felt familiar looked strangely distant. My heart was strangely quiet, emptied out, washed clean. No tears came. The hurt had hardened into resolve. I was heading to Lysandra's apartment, my best friend, my sister in spirit, the only person who could hold me together right now. She was a high-powered divorce attorney, brilliant, fierce, unapologetic. And she was already waiting for me. When the Uber pulled up, she was outside in the lobby of her building, arms folded, eyes burning with protective fire. The moment she saw me step out with a suitcase, she didn't ask a single question. She simply wrapped me in a long, firm hug. That simple gesture nearly broke me, but I swallowed the grief and held myself upright. Inside her apartment, small, warm, smelling faintly of lemongrass, she sat me down with a cup of hot tea and waited. Only when I was ready did I begin to speak. I told her everything. The message, the reply, the trap, the scene in the living room, the confrontation, and finally my decision to leave. I spoke with a strange, icy calm, as if describing someone else's life. When I finished, Lysandra slammed her hand on the table. "That bastard," she hissed, "and that little girl. You handled them better than half the women I represent. Hell, you handled them better than I could have." Her anger wasn't explosive. It was surgical precise, already shifting toward strategy. She studied the evidence, each screenshot, each bank statement, the hair, the movie ticket. She nodded slowly. "We can win this," she said, "easily. But before court—" Her expression sharpened. "We're going to teach him a lesson he'll never forget." And that was the moment the next phase of the war began. The next 2 days passed in an eerie silence. I stayed at Lysandra's apartment, tucked into her guest room, surrounded by her lavender candles and aggressively organized file folders. Outside, the city continued its usual rhythm, but inside those walls, everything felt suspended, held tight between fury and focus. Darius called nonstop, dozens of times. I didn't answer once. His messages came in waves first, begging, then apologizing, then accusing me of being cold-hearted. I silenced the phone and placed it face down. I had bigger things to focus on, because as soon as I told Lysandra I wanted justice, not just a divorce, not just freedom, but true accountability, she shifted into full attorney mode. We spent hours at her dining table gathering the evidence into a clean, razor-sharp file. Bank statements, screenshots, messages, photos, receipts, violation codes, professional ethics clauses. Every piece was meticulously labeled, time-stamped and formatted as if ready for court. But Lysandra had something more strategic in mind. "We're not airing this out publicly," she said. "You're not here to be messy. You're here to be effective." She showed me a draft of an email. The subject line was simple, cold, devastating report on internal code of conduct violation and inappropriate relationship between team lead and intern. It didn't contain insults. It didn't contain emotion. It didn't even mention me. It read like a formal HR complaint, written by a compliance officer, clear, factual, professional, and impossible to ignore. The recipients, the company's CEO, the HR director, 2 department heads, and the Ethics and Conduct Office. Not a single unnecessary person, just the ones with the power to end him. Inside the email was a single attachment, a PDF document over $10 million in size, compiled by Lysandra with surgical precision. Every item of proof organized chronologically, WhatsApp screenshots with timestamps, bank records showing misuse of funds, gift payments labeled "Happy Birthday," the movie ticket during client dinner hours, evidence of him lying manipulating hours and violating corporate policy, notes outlining the risk of sexual misconduct claims due to his relationship with a subordinate, a summary of workplace power dynamic concerns. It was a bomb disguised as paperwork. Monday morning arrived. The sky outside Lysandra's window was a dull gray, the kind of color that promised a storm. At exactly 9:00 a.m., when corporate workers logged in and opened their inboxes, I sat at her laptop with the cursor hovering over the send button. My hand trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from the magnitude of the moment. One click would change everything: his job, his reputation, his future. Lysandra placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You don't owe that man mercy," she said quietly. "Send it." I exhaled slowly, then pressed the button. Sent. A tiny notification popped up in the corner of the screen, cold and neutral, an astonishing contrast to the destruction it carried. The arrow had left the bow. There was no going back. The rest of that morning moved in slow motion. I imagined Darius arriving at work trying to force normality into his routine, utterly unaware that the walls around him were already crumbling. I imagined the HR director opening the email, reading line by line, face tightening. I imagined the CEO forwarding it to legal with a single command. Even without being there, I could see it. At 10:00 a.m., according to an acquaintance in the company, the inevitable happened. Darius was summoned to a conference room. The HR director slid a thick folder across the table, the printed version of the PDF I sent. He was told about the investigation, about the misuse of funds, about the falsified receipts, about the inappropriate relationship with an intern. He tried to argue. He tried to deny. He tried to claim misunderstanding. But the evidence was a noose around his neck. 2 security guards escorted him out of the building as employees watched in stunned silence. A respected team lead now walked out like a criminal. At Lysandra's apartment, when the phone call confirming his suspension came in, I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I felt nothing. Because this wasn't revenge out of rage. It was justice. Long overdue. 3 days after being escorted out of the building like a disgraced criminal, Darius's termination became official. The internal memo stated the reason plainly: serious violation of professional ethics and damage to the company's reputation. Just like that, his 10-year career, everything he had built, every ounce of respect he once commanded, was gone. In our city, corporate rumors traveled faster than wildfire. Once a man was branded as someone who slept with an intern, misused company funds, and lied about work hours, his name became poison. HR departments shared warnings. Recruiters quietly blacklisted him. Suddenly, the man who once overflowed with confidence couldn't even land an interview. And then reality hit him where it hurt most. The bills didn't care about his humiliation. The mortgage company didn't care about his tears. The car loan didn't pause to let him breathe. His income disappeared overnight, but the payments kept coming. Mortgage, car note, credit cards, utilities. Every envelope that arrived in the mail became a noose tightening around his neck. He called me constantly. At first, the messages were desperate, begging for forgiveness, begging for me to retract the report, begging for a second chance. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted into anger. "You ruined my life. You're cruel. You didn't have to do this. You're heartless." I read them with a cold, detached calm and deleted them all. Cruel, heartless. Where was that concern when he lay in bed with another woman? Where was that mercy when he spent our money on a birthday gift worth $1,500 for a girl who barely knew how to run a spreadsheet? Where was that loyalty when he whispered sweet words into the ears of a 22-year-old intern? No, this wasn't cruelty. This was accountability. When his family called, their hypocrisy nearly amused me. His mother, crying through the phone, called me a bad wife. She said it was normal for men to have affairs. She said a woman should endure anything to keep peace in the home. I felt a deep, bitter sadness, not for her, but for the countless women before me who had swallowed their suffering to satisfy this outdated, misogynistic belief. I told her calmly, "I'm not staying with a traitor." Then I hung up and blocked the numbers of his entire family. I wasn't going to let people who enabled betrayal lecture me on morality. While Darius sank deeper into financial and emotional ruin, Kehlani's world was collapsing at the same speed. The moment Darius was suspended, HR summoned her as well. She walked into that conference room with red, swollen eyes, her confidence shattered. Her termination was immediate. No discussion, no compassion, no second chances. She had violated conduct rules, created a toxic work environment, and jeopardized the company's reputation. Her excuses, "I'm young, I made a mistake, I wasn't thinking clearly," fell flat in the face of corporate reality. An intern with a scandal tied to her name, no company would touch her. But the punishment didn't stop at losing her job. The social cost was brutal. The story spread through anonymous company chats within minutes. She became a walking cautionary tale, the intern who tried to play bold to aim high to steal another woman's husband. In the cafeteria, people whispered. In the hallways, they stared. In the break room, conversation stopped when she walked in. By the time she packed her belongings into a cardboard box, no one offered sympathy. No one helped. No one even made eye contact. Men who once flirted with her now avoided her, entirely afraid of associating with scandal. A security guard escorted her out. At the elevator doors, as she clutched that box filled with the remnants of her premature career, he gave her a pitying look. That look, that alone, made her break. She burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably, unable to hold the shame anymore. She ran out of the building, clutching her box, her heels clattering across the pavement as she fled. Later, Lysandra told me Kehlani had moved apartments. She deleted all her social media. She disappeared from every group chat. The girl who once thought she could risk everything for a man who wasn't hers had learned the harshest possible lesson. Nothing destroys a woman faster than dishonoring herself for someone who never planned to choose her. And I didn't feel sorry. I felt nothing. Both of them had earned their downfall, one through betrayal, the other through arrogance and poor judgment. My story wasn't about punishing them for pleasure. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my future. And the next chapter of that future was about to begin in a courtroom where the final pieces of our marriage would be dismantled for good. 2 months later, the day finally arrived, the divorce settlement hearing. I walked into the courthouse with Lysandra by my side, sharp suit, sharper eyes carrying a folder thick with evidence. She radiated confidence, the kind that made even seasoned attorneys tighten their posture. Darius was already there. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked as though he had aged 10 years and 8 weeks. His beard was patchy and untrimmed. His clothes were wrinkled, hanging loosely as if he'd lost weight. His eyes, once lively with ambition, were sunken, hollow, desperate. He stared at me with a pleading expression, but I kept my gaze forward. No warmth, no softness, no nostalgia for what once was. I sat down without acknowledging him. When the judge entered and the hearing began, Darius tried to speak up. "Your Honor, I still love my wife. I want to save this marriage." Alessandra didn't let him finish. She stood placing a thick stack of documents on the table with a sharp thud. "Your Honor?" She said, "My client has provided irrefutable proof of Mr. Miller's infidelity, financial misconduct, and emotional harm. We request that the court proceed with the dissolution of this marriage based on clear grounds." The judge flipped through the evidence screenshots, bank statements, receipts, timestamps, even the documentation of his termination from work. Every page was a nail sealing the coffin of this marriage. The judge looked up at Darius. "Mr. Miller, do you dispute these claims?" His shoulders sagged. He didn't. He couldn't. His silence was his confession. Next came the division of assets. The luxury condo, the largest, most valuable item, became the main point of argument. Darius tried one last time to cling to something that reminded him of stability. "I want to keep the condo," he said, voice trembling. I don't want to be on the street." I almost laughed. Lysandra stood again. "Your Honor, my client is willing to let Mr. Miller keep the condo only under the following conditions. 1, he pays her 50% of the condo's value in a single lump sum. 2, he reimburses the $40,000 loan from her parents used for renovation. 3, he assumes the entire remaining mortgage." The judge raised an eyebrow, turned to Darius. "Can you pay your wife this lump sum?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked like he was suffocating. The truth was painfully obvious. He had no job, no savings, no prospects, and he was already falling behind on the mortgage. Lien notices had begun arriving. Foreclosure was looming. The judge pressed again. "Mr. Miller, can you fulfill this requirement?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I can't." Lysandra's voice was smooth as ice. "In that case, Your Honor, we request the condo be sold immediately and all profits after debts and loan repayment be divided accordingly." Darius crumbled. The judge approved. The luxury condo, once his pride, was listed for sale at a below-market price to move quickly. When it sold, the mortgage was paid. The $40,000 loan to my parents was repaid. My share was transferred directly into my account. And Darius, he was left with almost nothing. He signed the divorce papers with a trembling hand, his signature crooked, barely legible. When it was over, the judge stamped the documents and dismissed the court. Just like that, our 6-year marriage officially ended. Outside the courthouse, I walked down the steps into the sunlight. The wind was warm, soft. I felt light for the first time in months. I turned my head slightly. Darius stood in the courtyard alone. No car, no job, no wife, no home. He watched me get into a cab, his eyes empty, as if the realization was finally hitting him with full force. This was the price of betrayal, and it was far more than he had ever imagined. But for me, this was the beginning of something new, something clean, something entirely mine. With the money from the condo sale and the clean split of assets finalized, I finally had the chance to rebuild on my terms in my own way, with no shadow of betrayal hanging over my head. Instead of choosing another high-rise luxury unit, like the one I once shared with Darius, I picked a smaller, quieter condo in a peaceful neighborhood lined with trees, a place where the air felt gentle and the evenings whispered calm instead of accusation. It was mine. Every corner of it, every choice inside it, mine. I decorated it slowly, intentionally. Gone were the flashy, ostentatious furniture pieces Darius used to brag about, imported chairs, marble slabs, oversized art he never understood. I replaced them with soft, neutral tones, warm beige textures, leafy green plants, and a solid wood bookshelf overflowing with novels and journals. For the first time in years, my home reflected me, not us, and definitely not him. That night, I invited Lysandra over for a small housewarming. She arrived with a bottle of Cabernet and that triumphant smirk she always wore when one of her clients, or in this case her best friend, escaped a disaster with dignity intact. We sat on the balcony, city lights shimmering in the distance, a soft autumn breeze brushing our faces. She raised her glass toward me. To your liberation, she toasted. May you never waste another tear on a man who didn't deserve you. I laughed genuinely freely, something I hadn't done in what felt like ages. We clinked glasses, the sound crisp and bright in the night air. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe in the peace of this new beginning. My phone buzzed. A notification. My direct deposit from my promotion had hit. I had been officially made team lead after carrying a major project at work. The long hours I poured into my career, the focus, the discipline had finally paid off. Ironically, the pain I went through had sharpened me. I had become stronger, steadier, more grounded. There was a strange beauty in that. I opened Facebook just to distract myself and saw a new message from a stranger. Her profile picture was a bright sunflower in full bloom. She wrote, "Thank you. I don't know who you are, but your story shared anonymously gave me the courage to leave my abusive husband after years of suffering. Your strength became mine. Thank you for helping me save my life." I stared at the message for a long time. My throat tightened not from sadness, but from recognition. From the realization that the pain I endured wasn't meaningless. It wasn't wasted. It had become someone else's lifeline, maybe even many women's. I took a deep breath and let the cool night air fill my lungs. The past was closed behind courthouse doors. Ahead of me stretched something wide, clean, unfamiliar, but filled with possibility. I was Imani, 32, divorced, independent, and happy, honestly, deeply happy for the first time in years. I lifted my wine glass, savoring the bitter first notes and the sweet aftertaste that lingered. It reminded me of my life, because sometimes you have to swallow the bitterness before you can truly taste the sweetness of freedom. And with that, my story for now came to a gentle, hopeful close. Did you like the story, and which city are you watching from? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you so much for staying with me through this journey. If this story moved you even just a little, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another life story like this one. This channel is a new space for powerful storytelling. Stories of betrayal, healing courage, and the kind of strength we don't always realize we have until life pushes us to the edge. And soon there will be many more life stories waiting for you. So make sure you're subscribed and turn on the bell because we're just getting started. With love, strength, and respect, I'll see you in the next life story.